Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Basics Discussion Circle and Meditation. My name's Travis. I facilitate the group. So tonight, I think we'll just do a good old-fashioned breath meditation. It's kind of what we've been doing lately. Yeah, maybe we'll have a little spin on it here and there. We'll see. Hello. So we will go right into that. And okay. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Noticing if deep breathing feels good for the body. If it does, you can keep on breathing in this way. If it doesn't, you can switch things up. Maybe even deeper still or more shallow, heavier or lighter. In long, out short. In short, out long. And as you play around with the breath here, you can notice if you're exerting any pressure around the process of breathing. If there's any tension or tightness as the breath flows in and out. And see if you can consciously relax that tension. It's less of forcing the breath and more of allowing the breath to move, to flow. Once you've found a way of breathing that feels good for the body in this moment, you can settle into it. Settling into the breath, settling into the body, and settling into the moment. remaining focused on the in and the out breath. But noticing if there's any tension in the forehead or around the eyes. And see if we can soften that all the way through the in breath and all the way through the out. We want to make the present moment a pleasant moment, a nice place to stay. So when we notice any tension or tightness, we can just consciously relax it. The jaw, the neck, the shoulders. If you want, you can even imagine the breath flowing through these areas of tension, dissolving the tension away gently, gradually with each breath. Working awareness down the arms and into the hands, relaxing the hands. Guiding awareness down the spine and through the legs. And working awareness from the base of the feet back up through the body. Noticing any patterns of tension that you may have missed during the first pass through the body. And softening them. The stomach, the chest. Likely the shoulders again. The jaw, the forehead. They're quite persistent. And once you've gone through these various areas of the body, relaxing any tension, you can allow your awareness to just gently expand out to saturate the entire body. And it's not something that you have to push or force, it's just something you have to allow and intend that the awareness permeates the body. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Slowly opening the eyes when ready and stretching if needed. Never in a rush to leave the meditation. And taking the next few moments in silence to reflect back on this past session. Any time you felt particularly centered or calm, or anytime there was really a sense of the breath being refreshing or pleasant. And you can just kind of reflect on what you were doing just prior to that, where you were focused, how you were focusing, to discern the cause of that effect of calmness. This is how meditation can become a skill, building upon what we've learned and applying it. So as always, I'm interested to hear if anyone would like to share how that experience of meditation was for them. Whether you found it easy or difficult, or anything that came up for you during that. We have the live chat over here. You're also welcome to just say hello if you feel like. Hello, Marcel. Welcome. Hello, Maxwell. It's good to virtually see you. So I have a few different things that I want to maybe touch on tonight. Um, one thing was the other day I was listening to a talk by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, and it was interesting. He was talking about working with the breath in the meditation and the different levels of the breath, or the different layers of the breath. And one of the things that he said that I found very helpful is when we're working the breath through the body, right? there's different layers of breath. So there's the most blatant, which is like the in and out breath, right? And then there's other things like the that you can get in touch with. You can get a sense of if you focus on them, like the breathing of the pores of the skin and things like that. And he talked about this still breath, um, and it's this breath that is the second you begin to breathe in, it's already filled the entire body. It's already throughout the entire body. And that's regardless of whether we're focusing on making it do that or anything like that. The second we begin to inhale, there's this level of breath that's already permeated the entire body. So when we're working on working the breath throughout the body, you could consider it that we're really just working our awareness of the breath throughout the body. There's this breath that without any effort, without any difficulty, already permeates the entire body the second that you breathe in. So we're tuning our awareness to this subtler layer of breath. In the same way that you tune a radio to be aware of one station and then the other, you can tune awareness to be aware of one level of breath sensation versus another. So I found that really helpful. So there's not a sense when you're working the breath throughout the body, there's much less of a sense of like pushing or pulling or trying to force it into the shape of the body or whatever it might be. It's more of a, as I mentioned in the beginning, an allowing the body to be filled with awareness. So yeah, that was one thing I wanted to touch on because I found it helpful, so I wanted to share it. So yeah, with that, I'll go into a bit more of the topic that I put in the title, which I think was the self-centered nature of anger. Anger is a really fascinating topic for me because for a very long time, that's all I was all the time. So it's always interesting to me to explore. So this actually, so I was inspired by this because there was, I think it was yesterday, Jeff posted a post about anger, and then there was a discussion back and forth in the comments. And I really wanted to respond, but I'm not great at like comment conversations, right? So I thought I'd talk about it tonight here because it brought up thoughts and things for me. So there's another talk by Thanissaro Bhikkhu titled Passion, Compassion, and Dispassion, or Passion, Compassion, Dispassion. And that's one of my all-time favorite Thanissaro Bhikkhu talks. If I remember after class, I'll link it in the description below. And I might post it on the Facebook group. But something that he says in there that really struck me when I first heard it, he was talking about anger and compassion. And he was saying that anger, like there's within Buddhist practice, as a little bit of background, there's no such thing as skillful anger, or there's not this idea of anger being useful for anything. When the Buddha was once asked, is there anything you condone the killing of? The Buddha responded, there's only one thing I condone the killing of, anger. So the Buddha himself saw it as something that's never useful, that has no use. The only duty with regard to anger is to abandon the anger, right? So what was interesting is in modern times, and even within some interpretations of Buddhist practice, there's this idea of like a righteous anger, that anger is righteous if it's the anger is righteous if it's for a good cause, right? Or something like that, right? And I won't address that too heavily. But what I wanted to focus on was, as I mentioned in the title, the self-centered nature of anger. was when something makes us angry, the reason there's no such thing really within Buddhist practice of this idea of righteous anger, because pretty much all anger is self-righteous. Um, and what I mean by that is anger is a response, is an emotional response that we have from experiencing discomfort. So when something happens that makes us angry, and then we instantaneously create the story of we're angry because that is wrong. That's not justice, or that's not blah, blah, blah. We create the story around that. And then that justifies that feeling of anger, right? Really what's happening when we kind of peel back the curtain, because we're, Jeff often says we're angry, we're ignorant, and we're greedy. When we pull back a little bit of that ignorance, or some translations delusion, because we've deluded ourselves, when we pull that back a little bit, what we end up noticing, or what I ended up noticing, and then this was kind of brought this perception and this line of thought was kind of brought up by this talk, right? Is what's really happening is something has happened that's made us uncomfortable. What we get angry about isn't necessarily the justice of the situation or anything like that. What we get angry about is that our sense of comfort has been interrupted. And that might sound kind of intense for some people, right? We're not necessarily angry at the injustice that we're experiencing, or the mean thing that someone said to our friend. That anger itself actually comes up in a response to us feeling uncomfortable. We were at some degree of ease, and then something happened that made us feel uncomfortable. And then anger is a response to then get that discomfort under control, to try to fix the situation. This is why we, when someone confides in us, when we're like when someone's upset and they confide in us, and then there's this kind of knee-jerk reaction to, I need to fix this. It's coming more from that discomfort. The situation makes me uncomfortable. There's a discomfort to it. So then this motivation arises, typically in the form of anger, to try to fix it. But since we're operating from discomfort, there's not a lot of wisdom in this anger that's arisen, this motivation that's arisen to try to fix it, right? Oftentimes when we're in those kind of situations, and then this anger arises and we try to go fix it, more often than not, we end up imploding the situation rather than resolving it. So that was a really interesting perception, is we create these stories about how our anger is justified, and how it's this righteous anger because it's anger towards an injustice. But if we peel back those storylines that we've created about a sensation and an emotion that's arisen, what's really there is basically a trauma response to experiencing discomfort. And that's pretty much it. So in that talk, passion, compassion, dispassion, he talks about it's not about eliminating our desire to make positive change. It's nothing like that. It's about changing what's motivating us to make that change, to what's motivating us to go out and act in service of others, to help our friends, to all of these kind of things. What's interesting is we can become a lot more effective in these situations if we're instead of coming from trying to relieve our own discomfort, which is pretty much the baseline way that people will tend to react if they haven't really looked into the storylines that they're creating around these reactions. Instead of that, it's coming from this place of compassion. And the compassion is basically that we see something, we acknowledge that there's suffering there. And then we help, because when there is suffering, you help to, in whatever way you can, ease that suffering. But it's not coming from this motivation that anger always is, that there's a source of discomfort here that we're trying to fix. Because that's what we're working with, right? So that was really interesting to me to see that, and it might not be the most comfortable thing to hear. Maybe it's not the most enjoyable thing, because a lot of people are really attached to their anger, and they feel like their anger gives them purpose or gives them drive. One of my favorite analogies with that, in terms of anger being motivating, right, is that anger, if we compare it with archery, right, anger is really good at pulling back the drawstring, can really pull back the drawstring, but it is completely incapable of aiming. So we might generate all of this motivation, all of this effort from this anger, but then we end up shooting ourselves in the foot with it, or someone that we really care about. So that's kind of what I had on my mind tonight. It was something I found really fascinating. It was a talk I listened to a long time ago. Again, it was a talk by Thanissaro Bhikkhu called Passion, Compassion, Dispassion. And dispassion being a core Buddhist concept that oftentimes is kind of, when people hear it, they kind of equate it with like apathy or misery. If we're dispassionate, they're thinking of the version of passion, and the definition of passion that's like in the enjoyment of life, which isn't what the Buddha used as passion. The word, what's translated as passion into English, the closest equivalent that I can think of in that term is used in the context of crime of passion. So, because when we hear passion, there's lots of different meanings of passion, right? When we hear passion, we think about it's like this zest for life, this enjoyment of life, that we kind of idolize that type of passion, right? Which you could call it drive or motivation or whatever you want to call it. But no one's idolizing the passion within the context of crime of passion. No one's like, oh man, I wish I was so obsessed with someone that I would kill them for, no one's idolizing that type of passion. And that's the kind of passion that the Buddha addresses. That's closer to the meaning of what the Buddha addressed, right? This obsessiveness, this craving, this living in this fantasy world, this obsessive fantasy world. So dispassion or disenchantment isn't being without a zest for life. It's not being obsessive over things. And it's not acting out of a place of discomfort. Instead, it's acting out of a place of compassion. Applying ourselves to alleviate pain because there is pain. We apply ourselves to alleviate pain out there because we're acknowledging the pain that's happening out there, instead of trying to fix what's going on out there because of the pain that's in here. Very big difference, both in execution and in result. So that's all I have for today. If anyone has any questions or comments or anything, I'd be happy to hear it. Sherry said, anger is also exhausting. You feel briefly powerful, but then drained. So it is not an emotion of endurance. Whereas with compassion and caring, it is something you are in for the long term. Absolutely. And that's an important point you bring up there about I love that it's not an emotion of endurance. Definitely not. it can only pull back the bowstring a few times, right? Because it's exerting more effort than necessary to do so. Um, and it's still shooting you in the foot every single time. And I love that it drains you, yeah. And the cool thing with, or the interesting thing with compassion, with kindness and things like that, those things are actually energizing. And there's often, it actually brings up another point I'd like to touch. It's another point that's in that same talk. I'm going to link the talk and I'll post it on the Facebook group too. But he was talking about compassion fatigue. And when it's compassion fatigue, it's that same problem of we think we're acting out of compassion, but we're acting out of discomfort. Compassion within Buddhist context and everything is actually a very energizing emotion. It's a very motivating emotion. If being compassionate feels like it's draining you, it's a good idea to reevaluate our relationship with compassion, our relationship with our experience of compassion, and where it's coming from. It's really fascinating to watch these things and to notice the nuanced layers in emotion and in the mind. And compassion and caring, the something you're in for the long term. Absolutely. As we cultivate compassion, as we cultivate kindness, it not only energizes us, but it becomes easier and easier to generate it. It becomes more energy efficient with time. And it's not only healing for our relationships, it's healing for the body as well. When we're walking around with all this stress, all this tension, all this pain, it's not good for us and it's not good for those around us. It's not good for the body. So it can be very healing, very transformative to learn how to starve the anger out. Learn how to notice where our motivations are coming from, what we're really being motivated by. There's been so many times in my life that I thought I was being motivated righteously, right? And then once everything falls apart and I reflect back, it's like, oh, wow, that was not where I was coming from at all. So, yeah. Exactly, Maxwell. He said anger is good for the short term, but in the long run, constant anger becomes an enormous drain of energy for yourself and others. We're all about efficiency here. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on anything that I shared or anything else for that matter? Linda shared anger can also be addictive. Definitely. Because one of the reasons I think anger is so addictive, at least for me, is I have a bit of an obsession with being right? Being kind of romanticizing my intellect and that kind of thing, right? So being right is, on some level, it's important to me, even though I don't want it to be important to me. On some level, it's important to me because it's like there's this kind of like false value that I assign to being right? Here's that famous saying, I'd rather be kind than right. I'm working on it. But one of the things with anger, for me, one of the reasons anger was so addictive is because there's almost this like perception in the mind that being angry justifies an opinion or justifies a belief. Because I'm getting angry, it must be because I have something important to defend here, right? So it's when we're angry, we get to be right. Um, and we love to be right. So at least for me, my experience with anger, that's a big part of it. Is we love to feel that we're doing the righteous thing, like I mentioned earlier. We like to feel like what we're doing is righteous. And if we've developed this perception that anger is a sign that we're in the right, I wouldn't get angry about this if it wasn't important. I wouldn't be upset about this if it wasn't worth defending. These kind of perceptions, right? So it becomes so addictive because it feels like it reinforces your opinions and your beliefs. And we're all obsessed with our opinions, our beliefs, and our views. And like Jeff says, no one wanders around all day thinking everything they think is wrong. We're really, really attached to what's going on up here. So, yeah. With that, we are close to time. We have time for one more question or one more comment. Sherry shared, I do pretend anger with my dog. Totally gets her going with her own fake anger. We look like a couple nutcases, but it's a totally cathartic pandemic activity. Oh. Yeah, sometimes acting out can be helpful. Acting things out can be helpful. Acting out usually isn't that helpful, but acting things out can be. There was actually one time here we had a guest Zen master come, and he leaded laughing meditation. And it was one of the most absurd things to me, but it was wonderful. And it was literally just forced laughing, but like from the gut, like as much as you could feel like you meant it. So you had this room of like 20 people fake laughing. And about like 10 seconds into the fake laughing, it's so ridiculous that it becomes real laughing. And it was a wonderful experience. Maybe don't try it at the park or anything, but it was definitely enjoyable. And it had this way of just sweeping you up in it. Yeah. So with that, we will close. And yeah, so we'll close with a dedication of merit. If comfortable, please join palms. May any merit gained from tonight's meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. And to Ashley in her time of healing, may she be fully and completely healed. And to Eric and his family who suffer at this time, may they all be well. May they all be free from suffering. Metta karuna mudita pekka sangha teya cetasa chaturi bharatva vyarati samavadaru bhavena samadhammaru bhavena samasangharu bhavena sote hantu nirantaram. Good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you next week.